Hey, what's up, guys? This is Carson, and welcome back to another podcast episode. Today, I have a special guest, Curtis Schweitzer. He is the composer for Starbound, Halo Infinite, Airships, and he's done many other games, but those are some of the most popular ones that he's done. Um, we don't really have much of an intro. We jump right into the questions on this one to get into some of the good stuff, some of the good questions I came up with for this one. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear this one, so we're going to get right into it. How does approaching because for me, whenever it comes to writing scores for indie games, it changes, and the approach for Halo, I'm sure that was something completely different from the normal approach from indie games because it's all original stuff. It's not based off of like a long lasting history of games. But how does your
Sure.
approach change from different indie games? Is there different kind of like research into different genres that you look into, or how does that change between different games?
Um, I think that certainly, of course, Halo is different in the sense that there's like previously established music, so you have to kind of ask yourself like, what was the music that came before? Obviously, y- Halo is a lot like a movie franchise where they
Hmm.
establish a musical identity in the early versions of something, and you have to stay true to that to keep everything in a sort of coherent space, both stylistically, thematically, all that kind of stuff. So when you're doing an indie game, what you're trying to build is that coherence, right? You're in charge
Hmm.
of, you're essentially doing the first thing, right? Because like an indie game could easily turn into, more than one game. It could turn into
Exactly.
this big giant universe of, leitmotifs and all that kind of stuff. But with Halo, obviously you're stepping into somebody else's um, leitmotifs and stuff that has been established not just even by like Marty, right, but by
Hmm.
Neil Davidge and Kaz and all these other people, even people who like Gordy Hab who worked on Halo Wars.
Hmm.
So there's just a lot more looking around and listening and understanding what makes the stuff that came before you work so that you can make sure to respect that at all times.
Right. Did you ever get to actually like talk to Marty at all, like over DMs or just like in like any video calls about uh writing for Halo? Is that something you guys
Yeah,
got to do?
yeah. After the Discover Hope trailer, Marty actually DM'd me, and he's really super nice, and was just
Hmm.
sending some kind words along and stuff. So yeah, I did. I We had a little back and forth. It wasn't a ton, um,
Right.
but but yeah, he did write me in some nice stuff, and it was really kind of him to do that. So.
That's really cool. Um, do you because again, this is another thing that changes for me. But whenever you do get to write for these indie games, is something that I've realized is it changes quite a lot depending on the dev, like what they give you to write music for. Like for example, if they give you a build to actually play, or if it's like videos of gameplay or whatnot. What is the most typical thing that you write to whenever you get to work on these? Does it change often like it does, like for example, like for most people like me, um I'm sure Jolly, one of the other guys in the podcast today, his name's Eric.
Mhm.
Eric, say hi.
Hi there.
He also
Hello.
does indie game stuff, and I'm sure that it's the same for him where it changes. But for you, what's the most typical thing that you get to write to for writing these game scores?
I mean, I would say what I've written to more often than not is just like a text, basically a text brief, just
Hmm.
like this is what we're trying to do with this game. This is the style that we want. I would guess say maybe like a close second is like that plus some concept art, where you get like a real visual look at it. And then I would say even rarer is like getting like a pre-release build for me. So I haven't always gotten that. I've worked on games where I did everything based on um, just like written instructions, maybe some temp tracks that they're like, this is kind of the vibe we're going for. Um, Sometimes I'll get like a pre-release thing after we're done with the music to like see how the music we actually made actually works, but it's very rare to get a
Right.
build, at least in my experience, prior to like actually making stuff. So
Right. Yeah. I've always thought that was it's for me. Uh, there was one game where I didn't get anything at all. Like I had to rate a complete score to like just trailers online. Like I wasn't given any kind of guidance whatsoever. Um, and it's weird to think about how these devs think so differently about how music should be approached from each game, and
yes,
that's always such an interesting concept because like I went from that to immediately after working on one that I did within like a month or two, and I got a full build of the game to play. So it's very interesting how different these devs approach you wanting to make music. Do you ever get to do you ever get to a point whenever you're writing music for scores, do they ever tell you um to like slow down, that they are not ready for certain parts to be written for music? Or is it always they have something for you to work on?
I mean, I would say that's pretty rare. Um, I think most of the time it's such a collaborative process
Mm-hmm.
where I think work that other people do kind of inspires you, and hopefully there's also that other direction where maybe you're trying something out for them, and so you are sending them music that maybe inspires them to do something. So I think that's probably the most ideal situation.
Right.
Um, in most places where I've been working, I don't think I've ever been told like don't like we're done like that we have enough stop
Yeah.
so uh I guess I've been told like that direction isn't good, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't like that, right? Like
Right.
don't do that, do this other style, like more electronics or whatever. But as far as like total music, I tend to write a lot of music though. I tend to just like I tend to over deliver, I guess, in terms of just like
Right.
minutes, right? Because to me, especially if you're doing something that's all digital, like why not take that opportunity to expand what people are going to hear? I really it drives me crazy when games have really limited scores and do a lot of repetition of tracks.
Oh yeah.
To the extent possible, I want that to not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought is the more music that's there, the less that likely that is to happen because they have a chance to kind of put a different track in or something.
Oh yeah. You have a lot more to choose from if you do that.
Exactly.
Whenever you did Halo, I remember at one point I was talking to, I think, about strings and if it was like fake strings or real strings for Halo. Um, but since they were real, how much of that did you get to experience whenever it came to live sections? Because if I remember right, that was around COVID or something.
Yeah, COVID definitely made that less. That happened less, but we did
Mm-hmm.
get some in 2019 prior to everything exploding.
Oh,
So I did get to go like when we did the trailer, like we went to Nashville and recorded the trailer live there, so I got to go to that, and then
nice.
we did one big session in London that I got to go to before everything exploded and we had to start doing everything remote.
Oh, was
So
it at a Ocean Way and for the Nashville?
yeah, Nashville was at Ocean Way, and the London stuff was at Air.
Oh, nice. Air's a good one. Is that's
Yeah,
the
it's
if I remember right, that's the one that's kind of in like a at least the big main studio that everyone knows. It's the one in the big massive room with the from the ceiling the panels come down. Is that what am
yeah,
I
it's
thinking
like a
about the right one?
church.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a church. It's owned by I guess now it's owned by some like a Russian conglomerate, but it used to be
Mm.
owned by George Martin.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That was a good
it's
one.
pretty great.
That must have been really cool. I think I believe some of the interstellar stuff was done at Air,
Yeah, I
if I
think
remember
Hans
right.
Zimmer does everything at Air if he can.
That makes sense.
So yeah, in fact, I actually think when we were there, he was coming in after us,
Oh,
pretty
really?
soon after us or something. Yeah, so
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah, I know. If
Um,
they're like, "Oh, Hans," I'm like, "Oh God,
you're like, I have to
why
get
am I
out.
allowed to be here?"
That's really cool. Did you at all? I'm assuming the answer is no, but did you all like see him like in passing when you were leaving or anything, or
Nah,
was it a bit
nah,
after? Oh
no,
man.
because somebody books it out, and booking it out is super expensive, and you book
Hmm.
out, the main room, and so no one else is there when you're working. So
How I don't know if Was it like the guys at 343 that got to pay for that for the studio sessions
Yeah,
or
Microsoft definitely is
okay,
footing that
awesome.
bill. Yeah.
I'm sure that was I don't know how much it goes for, but I'm sure
Yeah,
it was a
I
lot.
don't either because that's the beauty of working with a music supervisor is that
Mhm.
I just show up.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure it
Whenever
was very expensive.
oh yeah. It's because that's one thing that I'm very thankful for because at the college I go to, as I said, it's a free studio. Like you can
Mm,
just book time and you get to go. So I'm very thankful that I don't have to spend like hundreds of dollars on studio time now.
yeah, that's
It's
definitely great.
it's very helpful. And I get to go in there and no one's hardly ever in there, so I get to go in there and I get to mess around and learn things. It's very helpful. It's very great. But whenever and this is something that's kind of back to the string stuff, but I've heard the phrase write for your players a lot. And
Hmm.
since writing for Halo, it was all I mean, whenever you send in the sketches, I'm sure it's all like actually like the digital, not digital,
Hmm.
but sample libraries or whatnot.
Yeah.
Whenever you send it in. So whenever you were writing for Halo, did you guys know who you were using to actually record these parts, or were you just going into it just writing string parts and not really knowing like which like because each like band I guess has a different sound in some ways, so I didn't know if you guys knew who you were writing for or if you guys just went into it writing just string parts that just worked and whatnot.
So didn't because I don't typically work on projects of that scale, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
typically get to work with like that sort of pool of musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know them. I do know that like for example Gareth is considerably
Right.
more, he's done a lot more in
Mm-hmm.
of that kind of like scale project. And so I do think at one point or another he would definitely know like that person's going to be playing, bass or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember at one point he was talking about how he's pretty sure the same person was playing the sample as was playing
Oh
the
wow.
the score. So yeah, I think that just goes to like show that he's like very accomplished and
Mm-hmm.
experienced. So whereas I obviously am not. So for me it was just write string parts that are good,
Right.
and we'll find good players for them. So
Oh, that's good. Was Joel he was he the supervisor?
yes, Joel Yarger. There's two Joels because there's also a composer Joel.
Right.
Joel. What's his last name? For some reason,
It's
blanking.
Cordless?
Corlitz.
Yeah,
Yes, of
Cordless.
course. He's fantastic. I've never actually met him because he joined after COVID. So
Mm, okay.
so yeah, but he's fantastic. But yes, Joel Yarger was our music supervisor. So
Okay.
he pretty much handled his our job was just to write stuff, and he would coordinate doing all the revisions and feedback, and setting up all the recordings and all that stuff. So
That's something I actually hadn't thought about that because Halo Infinite has been in production for I think the rumors are that it was like how long was it? Maybe 6 it was like 6 years or something for the rumors. I don't think that's true, but I know it was in production for a while, so who was the first one that got to like start working on music? Was it Gareth? Was he the first one approached for campaign? Do you know?
I think I was actually,
Oh, really?
because we started music right before the Discover Hope. That was when we sort of like
Oh, okay.
started putting like the actual score together.
Okay.
So we were added in 2019. So
Did you guys get to kind of use whatever motifs were from other games, or did they, for whatever reason, say there's ones maybe you shouldn't use or that you couldn't use? Uh,
I mean, there were definitely like requests, right?
okay.
Like, we really want to hear this here. How can you work that in? Like,
Hmm.
a great example is like that last ending cutscene that has the like Halo 2 like dun 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 dun, dun, that
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
That was definitely like a we want this here moment.
Okay.
And obviously the menu stuff, right? Like we
Yeah.
want the chant. So um yeah, there was that. I wouldn't say there was any like don't use this here, but
Okay.
I certainly had feedback on like, hey, can I put this in here? Can I use like, one final effort here or whatever? So
Right. That was something that I was wondering because I I just didn't know because there were other composers on that made like the other themes. I didn't know because I don't dig too much into like copyright stuff, but I guess if it is like for example Star Wars, it doesn't really matter. They can use the same theme. So that's just something I was wondering. Um
yeah, I mean, like Microsoft owns
the
everything,
rights. Yeah,
all
so that would make
Halo
sense.
IP. So
Okay, that would
yeah,
make
you can
sense then.
put yeah.
But also uh something I was also wondering on Twitter recently, I saw you were doing more stuff for airships.
Mhm.
Um, and I was wondering because it's not a sequel, it's more content. Yes, it's not a sequel, right?
No, it's not a sequel. Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's more stuff he's making.
So whenever it comes to going back to that, because you did stuff for the base game and everything, I was wondering how different your approach is now coming back to it. What kind of things you're doing differently, or what things you're still doing the same things of for reapproaching a game that you already did music for.
Yeah, there's just like I have a discussion. Airships is interesting because it's just me and him,
Hmm.
right? Like it's just two people working on it. So
Oh wow.
he sort of gives me the general like this is kind of the overarching theme, right, of like what I
Okay.
want to do, and then I just kind of try to form music, like fit music to that. So like the most recent update in August was like all
Hmm.
around diplomacy. So all of the music was like designed to help with that. So a lot of it was in the big mode where it's sort of like the big map, right? Because I knew
Hmm.
that you're going to spend more time there
Right.
because now there's something to do out there more than just move a unit.
Hmm. Right. And then the last like kind of questions or question not questions that I really had is something that I've recently started thinking about and I thought was interesting and I thought I'd ask you. But you've done some short films, scoring some short films, and this is something that again I think is just interesting to think about. But for films and TV and all that stuff, in your opinion, does the setting or environments of the film matter when it comes to the music? And what I mean by that is like, for example, Star Wars. Star Wars took place like it says like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and we don't see any traditional orchestral instruments in the films at all. But yet the score is very orchestral and has choirs and whatnot, and it takes inspirations from tracks like the Planet Suite, which was one of the temp tracks for A New Hope, I believe. And so it makes no sense that the Star Wars sounds are the way that it is, because normally whenever you think of sci-fi and the technology is more advanced, it's more like synthy, because it's like futuristic, and that's what uh, everyone considers futuristic. So how should musical instruments sound and fit into films, in your opinion? Like how did you approach those things with that kind of idea in mind?
So I'll start off with a really cheap, very media composer answer, which is it should sound however the director wants it to sound.
Mhm. Fair enough.
um, because I think that's an important thing to remember when you're working in media is that like you don't always get to make those decisions. Sometimes it's someone else's, and your job is to do your job correctly within whatever style they ask you to. So that's why
Mhm.
it's important to have range. Putting aside that kind of cheap, very diplomatic media composer answer, um, you brought up Star Wars. I think
Mhm.
that the reason Star Wars works is because I think that the orchestra is a very timeless thing. I think
You're right.
it's a universally applicable sonic palette that like can score a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away just as
Mhm.
well as it can score Conan the Barbarian because
Right.
it has breadth and it has been evolved over so long that it just has range and it has the ability to speak to almost anything that you want to put on screen. Um, I think there are other ensembles that have reached that level. I mean, I certainly think that today you could do Star Wars with all synth if you wanted to. You could do, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, look at Dune, right, which is sort of a hybrid, right, in a
Oh
truly
yeah.
Hans Zimmer style, and it works beautifully. It works exactly how it should. So I think the question of like how should something sound is kind of it's so wrapped up in how is the rest of the aesthetic of a film or a game or whatever, like how is it approaching that problem.
Mm-hmm.
There were no films in there's no films in the movie Dune really either, right? Like everything
Right.
is kind of these. So but so like do you use like cinematography and cuts to tell a story? Well, of course you do. It's just a question of how.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's really marrying the aesthetics of the film or game to the score in and playing to your strengths and
Right.
playing to the strengths of the people involved. So
Have you listened to a lot of the Mandalorian music that Ludwig did for?
I have, yeah.
That's. I think that's. I feel like if more synths or like electronics were introduced to Star Wars, I think that the route he's going is probably one of the best routes for Star Wars.
Yeah,
I.
I think so. I think that Star Wars is very organic,
Mm-hmm.
right? It has this sense of being a lived in place. It's not always, I shouldn't say it's not always like that. It's sometimes these very futuristic sci-fi things, and I think in
Mm-hmm.
those situations perhaps maybe something really really synth heavy would work a lot better, but Ludwig is so good at making synths sound organic, right? He
Oh
makes
yeah.
them sound like something that exists for real and is made of like dead trees or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's why that works.
He's. Have you? How much of his work? Just because I'm such a huge fan of his, how much of his work have you got to like listen to
I
of
wouldn't say I'm
Ludwig?
like super familiar with it. I'm familiar with anything of his that is, reached sort of broad, appeal and acclaim. I of course watched The Mandalorian. I like his
Mm-hmm.
score for Tenet, stuff like that. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself like,
A super fan.
an acolyte or like a scholar on his work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I know a lot more about like what James Horner wrote than what he
Mm-hmm.
did,
Yeah.
but I am aware of it. So
I his I somewhat I'm not necessarily a super fan. I'm more of a super fan of like like I said like Mick Gordon. But uh did you see that that year he did not win an award for music for Tenet? Do you see that?
I mean that's just awards are so it's so hard in media because sometimes the award is wrapped up in things you don't control,
Mhm.
right? Like you can write like the best score of the year, but if the movie's not very good or if the game
Mhm.
struggles, like you're just not going to get looked at, and that's okay. Like that's just the way the industry works. So,
Yeah.
um, in that case, I think he seems like he maybe should have had more recognition because that was a
Mhm.
pretty widely acclaimed film. But
Mhm.
you just never know. There's just so much that's outside of your. That's just part of being in media, I think.
Yeah. Is awards something that Halo for music? Have you guys won any awards for music for that?
I don't think so. Yeah. I think we were up for like a BAFTA.
No, nice.
We were up for I think a game dev conference of which I am sadly not familiar because it's usually for people who work on huge games.
Mhm.
That we also didn't win, but we're up against people like Austin Wintory. It's kind of
Oh,
when
cool.
people I've never truly understood the it's an honor just to be nominated, but yeah, I get it. Right?
Right.
So
Interesting. All right. Well, that's really all the questions I really had. Thank you for taking the time to like answer these and everything.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
are you what what other I don't know if you can really say, but how many more games are you getting to work on right now?
Right now I'm working on two. I'm working on the you mentioned the airships thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm working on another project that I can't really talk about.
Fair enough.
It's more kind of I can say I'm sure that it's kind of it's kind of more in the indie space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so uh, I probably could probably say something about it because there's not going to be some giant media marketing department that comes down on me. But I'll wait till the developer says something about it
Hmm.
just to try to be respectful of that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then I did another score over the summer for I would call it like maybe like a double A game
Hmm.
that has not yet been announced or talked about. So I
Mm.
will also wait on there because their marketing department might actually get mad at me.
They might. Yeah, you
So
never know.
yeah.
I have to watch my tongue sometimes too whenever I talk about games because I get so excited about talking about them and the music. But
Hmm.
I have gotten only once so far, but I've gotten a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, I can certainly understand how that's easy to have happen.
Oh yeah, and you have to wait years. How long? How many years did you have to wait before? Because you said you started working on Halo in 2019. Uh,
Hmm.
so did you have to wait that long to really say anything?
I mean, yeah, I started working on. I really, in terms of like, I am working on Halo. I only had to wait a couple of months because, like I said, I got brought in right before the trailer, and that's all we did for like 2 months is
Right.
just that one trailer. Um, and then they announced that I was working on it when that trailer was released. So that was I was like attached, quote unquote, attached to the project at that
Mm.
point. But like, I mean, we finished the score in like I don't know, spring of 2020 ish. Like we were done recording, maybe early summer, and then like the game doesn't come out till 2021. So that
Yeah,
that was a long that was a
that was a long
long
wait.
time. So
Did that was that was how was that awful for you having to wait that long to like be able to talk about it and show people?
I mean, I was proud of what we did. So not, I mean, yes, I wanted it to come out and
Hmm.
sooner rather than later, but
Right.
at some point you like it sort of goes back to that idea of like in media a lot of your recognition comes from how well the project as a whole does. So I just wanted them
Hmm.
to like work on it as long as they needed to and like
Yeah.
do as good a job as they needed to. When they announced that they were delaying it for a year, I was like, great, you know,
Yeah.
do it if you need that, you do that because my success is your success. So
You're probably not allowed to say anything about this, but for future DLC content, is that something you're getting to work on potentially?
you know
Or
what, I'll yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm not supposed to talk about it. I will say that at the moment I'm not working on it. So
okay, I was just wondering
yeah, no
because
problem.
there's so much speculation amongst my Halo content creator friends about the DLC and
Yeah,
DLC
and I think
expansion.
that I mean we gave him 5 hours of like super high quality music, so
Hmm.
I don't know what their plans are. I have no view into 343's internal process,
Right.
but I imagine they might be able to like separate stems out and use some of that for certain
Hmm.
smaller things. So I honestly don't think that this really says a whole lot about the possible process. So
Hmm. Because I'm sure you guys wrote enough music for them to be able to use some kind of stuff that that
oh yeah,
that
hundred
wasn't
percent.
actually used in the game.
I mean, I think almost everything almost everything I know about ended up on the soundtrack. So
Hmm. Okay.
there's like some other stuff that there's like 30-second stuff that's not on there, but it's really
Hmm.
short. But do remember they have obviously all the stems, right? So I mean they could probably put together whole other pieces if they wanted to, if they needed to.
Right.
So um like I said, whenever anybody asks me about this, I'm like, I would love to be invited back. At the moment, we're just we're just on in a holding pattern. So
Hmm. This I said I had one more question, and I'm done with all because I wrote down questions because
hmm
I wouldn't remember them otherwise. But I'm 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 wondering since Halo is such, and I'm sorry for asking so much about Halo because me
that's
personally,
okay.
if I work on a project, I don't want to be known for just that one. Um, so I'm not trying to I guess do that. But anyways, since Halo has been going on since 2001, like over 20 years now, and now that you have got to work on Halo, which is like my dad, for example, I never got to play the games with my dad. Um, that makes it sound like my dad's dead. He's very much so alive, but I never like got to sit down and play like split screen campaign with him. But he loved
hmm
Halo, and so I got to sit down, and my memories of Halo are with my brother playing all the games split screen. And now, recently, I got to play through the games with my friend Shane. through split screen and got him into Halo, or at least more into Halo. And so, how does that make you feel now, knowing that there are relationships that aren't like built off of games, but there's so much game stuff in that relationship, and now your music is a part of, people's friendships in a way, I guess. How does that make you feel to be a part of that like legacy?
Great. I mean, that's why you do it, right? Like,
Mhm.
you get a chance to like, yeah, you get a chance to set a memory for somebody, and music in particular too, because I feel like music is one of the easiest ways to have that like ratatouille moment where you get like sucked back to your childhood.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's just because it's kind of a cheat code, right, for music.
Mhm.
So I mean, yeah, that's cool to think that maybe someday somebody will have that moment, right?
Mhm.
And just get sucked back to their fun time they had playing it when they were a kid, or
Mhm.
when they were an adult or whatever. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely one of the very motivating parts of getting to work on a big project that isn't necessarily in and of itself musical, but
Mhm.
uses music in a really cool way.
Yeah. I think Halo is definitely one of the more well-known games for music. It's not like it doesn't take over like it does in Doom, but it's not super just like subtle ambient stuff that you just can't tell is there.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think
that's
it
true.
does one of those good blends. All right, I think that is actually everything I really have. I'm gonna be respectful of your time and not ask anymore. But thank you so much for coming on and answering some of these questions and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure.